Welcome back to the channel. This week, my friend Julian Smith has joined me to talk about some of his stories and experiences around the world drifting. He's quite the character and he's done quite a few unexpected things, many of which I didn't know about. We were talking earlier off camera, so I'm really excited to share those with you. But Julian, welcome to the channel.
Cool,
First
pleasure.
guest. Thank you very much.
First guest.
First guest.
Wow.
First go at this, so
Cool.
if I'm awful, I blame the guys behind the camera.
Don't worry. I'm sure I'm a good start to move forward on.
Let's hope so.
Exactly.
So, starting out, you are you're a Kiwi and you're an Irishman combined.
Yeah. So basically, born in New Zealand, moved over to Ireland with the parents and that when I was young. Grew up in Ireland mainly, and that's where I consider myself as being Irish. And all my best friends and kind of crew are back in Ireland, and that's kind of how it was really, and especially with the parents' place back home in Ireland. It was like motorsport central. We had the Cork 20th Circuit of Ireland rally and that going past the house and that growing up, and for me it was just absolute heaven. Father used to be into cars and that as well, so you know, as soon as I kind of progressed from driving the tractor around the field, it was kind of like anything else that we could, like Volkswagen buggies and off-road buggies and stuff like that.
But that's something that's particular from your area of Ireland, is motorsport is so rife there.
Yeah, massively.
It's very much part of daily life.
Completely.
Yeah.
So literally, majority of like the father's customers that would have had all like rally cars, autograss cars, hot rod cars, stuff like that. Having the amount of like official and international type rally events going around County Cork, County Kerry, the Rally of the Lakes, stuff like that. There was a lot of, it was kind of being the mid 80s was probably one of the best times for rallying, because it was midway through the Group B era. So growing up with kind of like one of the father's customers had the Rothmans Porsche 911. Of course, there was lots of Opel Mantas and kind of stuff like that. Mark II Escorts, which I have a Mark II Escort. I have an Opel Manta. Like, so it's all that stuff which kind of was my childhood dream that I have now, and it was all from those early young days. And of course, going sideways is what it was about. If you had a front wheel drive, you were a gaylord. So
I don't know if you can say that these days, but
I don't care. It's the Irish terminology.
It is indeed.
Yeah.
But from that, even up to this day now, in your area, you still have the Shanahans, the world champion James Dean, his brother Mike Dean, who's a very good driver.
Yeah, which again, starting off in a circle there, the Dean's father, Mike Dean, and his two brothers in that, they had a rally garage called I think it was RD Developments, Ray Dean Developments in actually just round out the back from McNamara's.
Okay, so Ray Dean is James's father?
No, Mike Dean is James' father, but his brother's brother is Ray Dean.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically there was actually the three brothers involved with that business, which was again specifically rally cars and that. So again, many times I was down there when I was younger, and actually the funny thing is that often when I was down there, this was when John Shanahan, who was Jack and Connor's father, was getting involved in the rallying as well. So just at the time when I was starting to get on the road with a license and that, it was all the rage back home was Toyota Starlets, the KP60 Starlets and that.
Still a cool car.
Super cool car. So nearly all of them back in those days had a Escort running gear, and that's where myself, I was involved with John Shanahan, who was involved in the rallying there. He was a young lad there, so I'm 47 now. He must be about 50. He was a couple of years older than me. So and combined with the deans and that, and a load more people as well, we never heard of drifting but every car had to be rear-wheel drive.
Rear-wheel drive, yeah.
And if you weren't winning, you were going sideways. So it was just as, or even more important, to be cool and be a hero as it was to be winning.
So that in itself is actually the origin of drifting.
Of course it is.
So you could argue that the beginnings of drifting may be in Ireland.
Well, when I first came here and I had my first 86, it was a case of the word drifting didn't even exist. So it was just called going sideways. And then whether it was like donuts or doing rings, whatever, at junctions and that. And that's kind of what it was. So I've got the old Max Power style number plates when all the other guys over here in front wheel drives. I had a 86 on 13-inch super lights and a Jansby was just going sideways on another plate, and that's what it was.
Well, that's, I mean, from my perspective, you were living in the epicenter of the beginnings of drifting.
Yeah.
And then decided to leave and come to England.
Well, yeah, because the thing is that I had all the hopes, dreams and aspirations in Ireland, but it just wasn't really the place to kind of be, especially for a kind of motorsport career. And the thing is that I did a electronic engineering course in third level in Tralee, and it just didn't kind of get things moving there either. And especially this is in the era of like ECUs, mapping, understanding electrics, like, because we were trying to progress from carburetors and that.
Yeah.
And again, the information wasn't in Ireland, so I was kind of chasing my dreams, going to London to get an apprenticeship with a Porsche dealership. But unfortunately, me being a typical tick green paddy with a hammer and a vice grips, I thought I was getting a job in a Porsche garage, and I was told to go as quick as I can.
Yeah.
Exactly. And with all of that, between literally sleeping rough, between floating between different garages, kind of chasing the dreams, chasing the streets paved in gold, and again getting a very kind of quick dosing of reality. I'd left Ireland because I didn't want to be working on trucks and tractors, but then it kind of did a circle that the only job I could really get in London was working for an Irish firm on trucks and tractors and that.
And that was WMS?
No. That was Fitzpatrick Construction, which was just a big Irish construction firm, one of the many around London. But it was good money if you were a hard worker, and very soon got me on the property ladder and got me like with cool Mark II Escorts, 2.8 Capris, A86s, stuff like that, the stuff that I could afford. But as soon as I could afford it, I was just there, this stuff should be in Ireland. So my pocket money and chasing the dream, again going sideways, was shipping all this stuff back to Ireland, anything rear-wheel drive, back to Ireland, back to Cork.
So you came to England, then stole all our cool cars, sent them back to Ireland.
Of course, because you were in the Max Power era chasing all gay front-wheel drive stuff, weren't you?
That's true. That was
exactly.
Like prime of the Ford Fiestas and
Renault 5 turbos,
exactly,
scrap, absolute scrap.
Which oddly enough are coming back around and being cool again. So, but that's a different podcast entirely.
If you think it's cool, you crack on. Yeah.
So you, when I first came across you, you were working at WMS, which we ended up calling Double MS as a bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So that was like when you very first came into drifting. So how did you actually stumble on drifting and end up?
Basically, I had I pretty much rinsed the UK of 86s, probably about 30, 40, maybe more 86s. I'd sent loads of Escorts back, stuff like that. And this was just when E30, M3s and 325 Sports that you're talking about, say, around 2000-ish, were kind of getting towards the 10-year-old kind of age, and were obviously the ideal cars to be kind of taken to Ireland. So I had quite a lot of them around me. And I'd started doing track days with Mike Dean, James Dean's brother, at Castle Coombe, like BMW track days using M3s, 325 Sport, stuff like that. Again, the whole aim was going sideways, but this time we were the 100-mile-an-hour barrier, so the adrenaline was rocking. And opened a copy of Banzai, it was either a Banzai or Japanese formats, specifically to grab the free ads at the back, find a twin cam for sale, and read a thing called drifting, first event drifting. And I was just there, what the hell is this? So open it up, and I'd only ever had one S13 prior to that. It was a CA, the blew up the turbo, fixed the turbo, blew up the engine.
Yeah, standard.
Never again. So I was reading this thing called drifting. I said, you know what? That's just up by Silverstone. I'll give it a go. And I think it was the second ever event, because I think the first event was at Kerbera, which I went to afterwards.
I think the first one was not Kerbera. What was the big Bruntingthorpe?
Okay.
And then the second one would have been at Turweston.
At Turweston, yeah. So it was the second event, which is where I obviously met you, James Cock, people like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Kiki, I think Brett Castle was there. I'm sure
Castle.
Phil was there. Phil Morrison Driftworks.
I think Phil was there as well. Yeah.
So that, I had I had no idea what I was going up to. I think I actually went up in a BMW and ended up entering. And I think, did I get on podium or something?
I think you did. Yeah,
I think I did. Yeah. So the first Japanese drift event I went to in a BMW, and kind of went, well, I could do this. It's just going sideways, and ended up on the podium. And then that was kind of the point of changing my life, really, because from there on, all of my kind of life decisions and kind of influences became drifting, and it's still my life.
Well, I suppose at that stage it put a name to what you were doing already. And gave you direction with it.
It completely did, because prior to that, it was just going sideways and being cool, being kind of a people's hero kind of thing. Whereas there, it was a name, it had a category, it had direction, really, which gave me direction, because really prior to that I didn't have a direction,
So from there, I mean, knowing some of your history, things kind of got out of hand, didn't they, really? Because you started then getting into all of the competition side of it, and we both did D1 Great Britain, and then you started your own garage. So how did you go from the process of starting to enter competitions and get to actually opening your own drift shop? Because you were one of the first.
Yeah, being completely honest about it, I would change the word of direction into addiction.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure that most people involved in drifting, and to be honest, most forms of motorsport anyway, an addiction becomes a very, very kind of good term for it, and that's exactly what happened to me, where I had started building an E30 BMW using E30 M3 Evo running gear and that to actually use for rallying in Ireland. So it had full FIA seating, FIA cage, absolutely everything. It was basically lighter than an M3, being a 316 non-sunroof shell, kept the cage minimum. I was going for the 1,000 kilo kind of build, like what an ultimate 235, 240 horsepower twin cam 86 would be. This is what the next stage was going to be. Yeah. And I was well into the way of building that when all of a sudden the whole drifting malarkey came along, and I was just there, right, we need to go next level here. So that gave me direction with that car. And to be fair, in the 2002, 3, knocking on 2004 era, I probably podiumed most events that I did with that car, and just simply out of power to weight ratio.
And it was very reliable. And
super reliable. NA powers, of course. When I was driving it, all I could think of was Wayo in Japan, like white 86, full send, hard as it would go. And even that kind of tied in with myself and James doing testing for the original drift box. Back in the day with Race Logic, and that's where we did that first kind of group kind of picture thing with Option Motorsport, in Kiki and that, doing the angle thing where we were pulling, I think it was 69 degrees or 72 degrees.
Yeah, we were almost tricking the box. Yeah. Just for reference, the drift box was a unit that a company called Race Logic made, which was it used telemetry to measure the speed, angle, and inertia of the vehicle. So that was something that came out. Yeah,
exactly.
Around that era.
Exactly, but that was fun. But the thing is that getting back to the actual competitive nature of drifting, we'd started going to the first D1 event in America and that, and this was myself, Graham McNamara, Mike Dean, all of the original kind of heroes involved in the sport and that, and obviously saw what the Japanese had brought to the table.
So
Which
was this the first D1 exhibition, or was this
Yeah.
the first Formula D?
First D1 exhibition, basically.
Okay.
So around the 2000, not sure whether it was the end of 2003, beginning of 2004, but it was basically Irwindale.
2004, I believe it
Yeah.
was. Yeah.
Mm. So that was the biggest eye-opener there, because the Americans had cool cars, and you have to look at the origins of like Von Gittin, when he had like a blue PS and stuff like that.
He still has that car.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. So that was really where it was like, wow. So this is what real drifting's about. Because even like this was a time when I didn't even have a computer, so I didn't have the access to the online movies or stuff like that. So actually going to America and meet the Japanese, seeing it all, sooner had me realising, right, we need a lot more power to be doing the sport. We need a lot more grip to be doing the sport. And it became, again, chasing the addiction, which, again, got me the introductions with Kiichi Tsuchiya and of course, my number one kind of car and driver was Ken Nomura with the R34. I've spotted one there. Yeah, exactly. And that's where it kind of snowballed, that within what felt like no time, we were then testing Silverstone in a silver R34 four-door, which
stood there next to you. Yeah,
exactly. Which I had basically bought a sort of a tribute car to Nomura, and actually ended up having Kiichi Tsuchiya and Ken Nomura driving that car, testing Silverstone in 2004-ish for the 2005 D1 event.
So all of these things that you're doing are basically just compounding this desire to continue drifting and get more power and do more outrageous things. So
exactly.
At what point through that journey did you then start Garage D, which is Garage D is Julian's company, which is dedicated to drifting?
Honestly, it was I had kind of no plans really, because it just became a case of every single weekend there was a drift event on. And whether it was anywhere around Europe, Ireland, England, I was often getting paid for it, so stuff like that. I was doing work with like Tifton Dell, Vicky Butler Henderson, doing a lot of TV work, stuff like that. But unfortunately, by 2005, when it was only myself and Darren McNamara who'd qualified within the 2005 D1 GP event amongst the Japanese, when reality started to hit, because I was also driving the HKS S15 for HKS Europe, Nob Taniguchi's HKS 15 RS1. Yeah, so I was also driving them, but the reality came that when I couldn't use the S15 for the D1 match, because of obviously there was political issues in Japan, and I had to use my black R32 road car, which you probably remember was just a road car.
I do very well, yeah.
So literally stripped the interior out, bodged the cage into it, sent it. Unfortunately, I got beaten by Yuichi Imamura, who I think was previous year's champion, but it still got me kind of halfway up the Japanese bunch.
And that was in the RX-7.
In the RX-7,
which is a very, very fast car. So.
Exactly. But he put it to the door, because I was considering myself to be an amateur, but after spending a lot of time with Kiichi Tsuchiya and understanding the drift line, the drift judging, how it all worked, really kind of upped my levels and understanding for the sport there, especially with when you're competing with the best in the world. But the unfortunate reality of it all is that after this absolute snowball of drifting, I got back to WMS, and the owner said, "Julian, I'm glad you've done all this." I said, I'm delighted for you, but reality is you have to be here to work, and you're never here. You're here on a Tuesday or Wednesday. You're packing up and loading, going off to another car event or working on your own car. He said you're gone for the weekend. You don't get back till Monday or Tuesday. So if you're here for a working week, you're only here really for a Wednesday. A
couple of days and then you're off again.
Exactly. And, no offence, but things have to change really. And I probably had more cars around there than I did, than they did.
So Garage D was basically a reality check where you wanted to continue with what you loved, your passion, but you also had to pay the bills and
exactly,
and have a
because
normal life.
I had a family, I had young kids, had a mortgage, and it was kind of the reality kick of, you know what, you have a job, or you should have a job, you should have a responsibility, and it's not till it's pointed out to you do you realise, yeah, you're right, because now as a boss, I wouldn't tolerate it. So looking back at it, he was dead right, and said it correctly at the time. And that's when I kind of started winding things down to go, you know what, I need to grow up a bit here and be slightly responsible. Wanted to set up a drift garage, knew nothing about a business, didn't even have a name. And then in around late 2005, 2006 probably, around 2005 probably, got a call from the infamous Butsy Butler and Richie Warren and that about doing the English translating for Initial D. So in going around kind of circles with that, I suddenly thought, and it was actually who helped me with the name, and this is a name that I haven't thought about for a long time. Do you remember Simon Thorpe?
I do remember Simon Thorpe.
Pink 13.
Pink S13, glasses, very highly strung chap.
Yeah, exactly. But what I would have said, a very good Englishman and that, and he came up. Well, myself and him basically came up with the name Garage D,
which is obviously a play on Initial D.
Initial D, exactly. And I kind of wanted a name that it suited Performance Garage, that it sound cool, that spelt out drifting to drift people, but didn't kind of say drift garage and then a person with any other sports car didn't want to just take their car to a drift garage.
But oddly enough, at this era, when you began Garage D, you then ended up working with the Initial D project on the film. So that maybe that lent itself to your Google search.
But to be honest, what became kind of the coolest thing in 2006, which is when I set up the garage, was I actually ended up in Tokyo and Fuji doing work for Tokyo Drift. So that was really when the whole JDM meaning, which was my first time going to Japan, really kind of sunk in, because I had been on the grid with all the Japanese guys the previous year in Silverstone. When I went to Japan to Fuji, obviously I knew Weo, I knew Ken Nomura, especially Abe, his mechanic, legend, and met Kumakubo there, and he was basically saying, come to my track, Ibisu. So what became a Tokyo Drift experience in Fuji, where we had rented the actual drift pan in Fuji, and that was, again, absolutely amazing. That was the first time that I met Andy Power Vehicles, and that, which is obviously a very important and great relationship. Went to Fuji. Coming away from Fuji, going to Ibisu, this is just where the next level origins of drifting, like all of the mountains around Hakone and that, which is again where Initial D was filmed. So
did you then get to, obviously you've been out and you've drifted Ibisu, did you then get to see the actual real street side of the driving in Japan as well while you were there? Because that's quite a difficult thing to get into for
it is, but we only saw a small bit of the actual mountain type drifting in Japan, and never saw enough of it to say this is really what it's about. Like, to be honest, you see a lot more on your typical option DVDs and videos.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which is absolutely bonkers. We could see the evidence of it, but we never actually got into it enough, because obviously we were the gauging, we were the foreigners, and not only that, but they were led by a Tick Paddy.
Well, I think even when you're living there, they're quite elusive. It's not something you can just turn up and join in. You've got to work your way in slowly.
Exactly, and know who, etc. Yeah. So the coolest thing was with Ibisu was just seeing all of the different cars, the different tracks, and the kind of it isn't polished there. It's very basic. So seeing that the flip side of where the drifting was trying to become too quickly a motorsport in Europe, but seeing the actual more of the street origins there, putting it on a track, that it didn't really matter. It was just a case of friends having fun. and this is what I've tried to keep a lot of my own personal life and drifting about, friends, having fun, etc. And that's where Ibisu is really what it's about, where they just straight away gave us a car, had a laugh. Unfortunately, Martin French, we all know the absolute lunatic and hero. When we first saw the Minami jump, Frenchie was just there. Yeah, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he wrote the car off straight away.
But it's understandable. I mean,
of course,
when in Rome.
Yeah, exactly. So coming back from Japan was basically 100%. This is Garage D. This is what I'm doing. I've been to Japan, and this is how I kind of see and perceive the business, and which was a great idea. But as a businessman, I hadn't a clue. Absolutely hadn't a clue. My accounts was a shoebox, and it absolutely sucked. It absolutely sucked.
Right. So then you decided to push forwards with your business, and what was your plan? Like, how did you think this was going to pan out?
Honestly, I had no idea. I had no idea. I was just a tick paddy chasing a dream, really. And basically, the first build that I kind of had with the garage, which was end of 2006, beginning of 2007, was Phil Morrison's Driftworks S15, which I was honoured to be involved because I'd done work from previously with his previous cars, and literally thinking about it back in the day, at that era, there was only a handful of S15s in the UK, and to be getting this absolutely minter and chopping it to bits, cutting the bulkhead out and landing a 2JZ Super and V160 box in it was absolutely crazy. But I had this vision of a drift car. It needs to be 50-50 weight distribution, and this is how it needs to be. And literally, it was an epic build, and the way that I kind of saw it was that I can't be developing my business and out driving, because I've spent the last couple of years driving and it literally broke me. So I need to use the credentials from that to get my business going. And obviously Driftworks is a very up and coming forum and business there. So they had a lot more of a plan, and they were ahead of the game a lot more than I was. So my vision was build them a car, send the car out, and that's my rolling kind of advert. And it was, because it had the British Drift Championship, I think, a couple of times. And Phil, no offence to him these days, but he absolutely rocked it in that car.
I mean, to coin the phrase, it was very competitive.
Oh yeah,
and definitely, I think that's it is the quintessential Driftworks car, isn't it? That's the car that really solidified Driftworks on the map.
Completely, where it was also probably one of the very, very first cars that really kind of put the JZ S-body kind of combination in place. And even the very same car would be competitive these days, even if the engine had been shifted forward slightly, and obviously the bulkhead kind of repaired, let's say, and more of kind of weight biasing and more suspension development done, that it would still be a top level car as what James Dean's Peter Vensick's car is these days.
It's the proven formula, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
I suppose the very start point for that would have, rest in peace, been Atsushi Kuroi with the RB26, who later then
ended up JZ, which I'll tell you a bit of interesting history. Is obviously shortly after his death, which was very, very unfortunate, the first one or two times that I went out to Ibisu with my own cars, doing the own kind of Matsuris and that, his old business partner turned up in that car, drove it on the street with the 26 with the blue, but still had the yellow engine bay. So we were down at Minami, down with Robbie Nishida, and that car rolls up and I'm just there, oh my God. Because the last time I'd seen that car was when Croy was driving it in other states.
Well, that car and Kuroi were just so...
At one.
And he set such a precedent with his driving, because he was one of the first guys who would not only drift the circuit, but drift an entire straight, because he had so much power.
So much power, exactly. So. And the thing is that it led to a lot kind of different driving aspect as well, because he had I think a T78 or T88 something very, very large on a big high road.
Turbo.
A truck turbo, as I've said in the past, I think with Tiffnedell. But so basically just kind of, he was an absolute hero, and he drove the car as he literally, in Dwayne McKeever's kind of style, he wrung its neck like.
Well, I spoke to Dwayne last year at Driftmasters, and Croy was one of his biggest inspirations.
Yeah, would have been,
so that's the whole purpose of Dwayne having the RB26 in that car is a tribute to Karoy, which I thought was beautiful.
Big time.
But so from there, where do you go next? You've done so many things because you.
Well, the thing is that I got the Driftworks 15 done. That was my kind of initial business plan. That led into me building Christie Carpenter's S15, which was originally an RB, original RB car. That was such a cool car because that was basically the following year with genuine BN wide body kit. It had every IKEA Formula Arm. It had the best of everything. Had a 26 in it, which was very successful initially, but unfortunately suffered from a cracked block, a cracked liner, where it then had 1J put in by Dean's back home in County Cork, and then it undertook a few different styles where it became the Nexon flagship car.
When it was purple,
it then ended up with the Advan graphics style on it as well.
Black and red livery.
Exactly. And those two cars were literally my first kind of babies or offspring or whatever, which was actually really funny because I was judging a King of Europe event a number of years ago, at least 5-6 years ago in Italy. The two cars were there.
How bizarre. But also another wonderful segue into the fact that you've judged all across Europe as well. So
of course.
How did you start judging? Where did that come from?
It was basically me kind of saying in 2006, 2007, setting up Garage D that I'm always going to have cool cars to drift, as in more of street legal cars. So like the Castrol 32 was a car that I did for advertising Tokyo Drift because of the Castrol relationship there, and it was a case of still kept drifting for a fun aspect, which kind of led me into the relationship with Graham McNamara and that, and doing a lot of the original drifting for Pro Drift and that, and of course that led me into doing a lot of drifting around UK and Europe as well.
So just to interject, Graham McNamara used to run a series called Pro Drift, and he still runs a company called Pro Drift in Dubai.
Pro Drift Academy in Dubai,
And he was one of the sort of
he's
forerunners of competition, wasn't he?
Yeah, completely. So he was definitely head of the game when it came to organising events and kind of getting the event kind of format, judging kind of formats, etc. sorted. Along with Kieran Hines as well, who's
still judges today.
Still judges. And the great thing was that as much as I was doing a lot with Graham McNamara there and around Europe and that, the whole time while all of this was happening, his brother Darren McNamara, who was my kind of who was the only other person who got through the D1 in Silverstone back in 2005, he ended up driving for Falcon in the US. So we still had the connection from D1 USA becoming Formula D. Darren was doing very, very well there. This was in the glory times of kind of the American drift scene where you had Team Falcon as just being absolutely amazing.
Well, they've always been on the top of the roofs, haven't they?
Completely.
But going backwards slightly, you did mention there that you started doing some work with the Fast and Furious. So I know that you built a lot of the cars for the Fast and Furious film, 6 film, and for the live action arena.
Okay. So kind of being perfectly honest. Especially on camera here, which is a bit hard.
Don't mind that.
A bit harder for me, but. The business plan, running my accounts out of a shoebox and kind of stuff like that, really kind of started to fall apart with Garage D in sort of the late 2000s. So I'd had kind of the glory times of the S15s, I'd had Kennemora Blitz 34 come over. I'd had lots of cool cars in, but I just didn't have the staff or the understanding how to run a business. And I'll be honest, I was stuck in my own bubble. And when I got offered a job with Fast and Furious 6, when they were just setting up in Longcross Studios, which ironically is only just up the road.
Up the road, yeah.
Yeah. It was a case of I thought I was kind of going there for a week, and then within the week I realised this is going to be a lot longer, and I just didn't have kind of the staff or the cooperation at the garage to trust the garage, so essentially closed it because I was doing so much and I couldn't see kind of a date or a time with the Fast and Furious, that I was just there, you know, let's go flat out at the Fast and Furious. I was supplying them cars, I was building cars, I was doing a lot of the driving and testing for the cars, because they have the Cobham area there, they have the massive airfield there, and essentially closed up the garage. But the whole time while I was doing that, I was building up the finances to actually be able to afford to have it closed, but at the same time looking at it more from a customer's aspect of looking in at the garage rather than actually in my own bubble, just going around circles basically. And that's really what it was about.
So that would be around the stage, because now Garage D has a reputation for being a very interesting place to be. Because you have so many, you know, a bit like the back wall here, there's so many little artefacts and peculiar wheels hanging on the wall. And so did this begin your hoarding phase as well? Around?
I think I've always had a bit of a hoarding phase since County Ballyhooly and County Cork, let's say. The evidence is still there. No, it's more of a case that I've always kind of had the nicky-nacky kind of interest anyway, and especially when it comes to quality engineering, like the JDM engineering kind of development there. You know, I've got so much stuff like that, where there's so many products out there now that you take for granted, but back in the day, especially coming from Japan, it was a big deal. Like the progression of lock setups, suspension understanding, going into different dampers, different alignment setups, the transition of, let's say, in Japan, everyone still uses a mechanical handbrake, whereas everyone in Europe, because they were you know, looking at the rally cars, everything had to be a hydraulic handbrake, which is still not needed. The understanding of how LSDs and proper lockers worked, etc. And obviously a lot of this kind of created the engineering development of WiseFab and stuff like that, which was initially just for lock, but understanding Ackerman, then to obviously the WiseFab rear development for grip. And that's where the Japanese might have invented drifting or given it a term, but I definitely think it was more of the Europeans and even the Americans who actually developed it to where it is now.
I'd say in terms of engineering, you'd be completely on the money. I think there's a whole other podcast in talking about geometry and how the East and the West differ.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of it boils down to the welded diff, if you looked at it that way. But I digress. Yeah. So we're going back to the Fast and Furious. So you've collected all these things. Yeah. And you've got your garage set up. Yeah. And then you've closed it completely.
Yeah.
And gone off, and that was a year of your life.
Yeah, completely. But it was honestly probably some of the best times of my life, because I met so many different people in so many different like specialist areas really, and made a lot of friends there. Especially that I met my current Mrs. Penny, who was involved with the catering on the film as well, and that's 8 years ago now, and. Happy days, many adventures since. Yeah. And but also gave me a lot more of a skill set, including a business kind of a skill set that when I was kind of looking at finishing up with the filming during the summer, but ended up doing special effects, which was another long story. That Dara Rice, who was a customer of ours, got in contact with me to say, you know, there's no one at the garage, XYZ, what's the story, told him, and he basically took over running the garage in summer 2012 when I wasn't even there. And he's been a very, very essential part of the team since. And he's basically been the face of the garage through the office, the phones, the emails, which is what I'm not interested in and didn't have a clue.
You're a very hands-on guy.
Exactly. Yeah. And I don't want to be sat in the office. I want to be either driving cool cars or building cool cars.
Yeah.
So with what his kind of valuable part of the business there, and also I think there's a good balance between us in the understanding of the business. That's when things really progress, because he is, how to say, the rock there for me.
Well, the Garage D has definitely progressed as a business since Darragh
big time.
So,
yeah, big time.
So he's like your second wife, if you like, at this stage.
Yeah, and since then things are progressed very well, where the contacts in the film and TV kind of industry there led us to doing a lot more work, and especially where we're based, which is very near Longcross, Pinewood, Elstree, Leavesden Film Studios. We're right in that kind of catchment
in the epicenter
area. Exactly. So we do a lot of work for them, and it's been like really good, and always gives us a bit of a fresh take on the business as well.
And a large variety of cars as well, because you're not only working on, what we know and love, which is Japanese cars, the odd BMW, but working on American cars and
exactly that.
All sorts of hydraulic rams and presses and lifts and pumps and
exactly. But yeah, so on that side of things, with kind of the new management and direction for the garage, it became a lot more kind of about selling parts, because the thing is that I would still be away a lot doing drifting, going to gap bill kind of things like that. So it became a case of now the business is kind of 50-50 between the actual workshop and actual building, tuning cars, etc. Whereas the other 50% is a combination of new and used parts.
Well, I mean, speaking of 50-50 and gap bill, you seem to be spending half your time in Norway at the moment.
I might have only just got back.
Yeah, you've
literally
a few days ago. Come back from ice drifting again.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you have quite the relationship there as well. How did you start going to Norway and drifting, ice drifting?
Well, again, cut a very long story short. Probably one of the first gap bill videos I ever saw was the VS Motors E34 M5, which was just absolutely bonkers. I
think everyone should probably have a search for that car.
Yeah, VS Motors E34 M5 with Skogan. Yeah. Well, I think it went out there 1100, 1200 horsepower. In the end, it was 1500 horsepower. Yeah. But again, that was in a era where 300, 400 horsepower was amazing. Anything over 500 horsepower was bonkers. Like the Driftworks 15 back in those days was 600 horsepower. Yeah. And then you have these crazy Vikings doing twice that power again. And not only that, but not really understanding drifting, but just power sliding. And that was what was absolutely crazy. And then seeing all the other machinery there. That's when we started getting a relationship with the likes of Frederick Asbo, Frederick Sawley, people like that, where the infamous Bon,
Ben
drove his 32 literally from what was, I think, 2006 Garage D Red Dot Racing and that, where he drove straight there and competed in the Breeslad competition, which is their power slide competition.
Yeah.
And he was a overnight hero for that, and that kind of got our contacts there, where again around 2011, 2012, I first went to gap bill with Dan Joyce
from Dirty Sanchez.
TV show. and Farouk. Remember Farouk?
Farouk, who now drives in Formula D.
Yeah. So we road tripped out there with the Blitz 34, which I'd only just bought the year before, and it was just absolute heaven. And this was when it was the old Rod Skogan track, so it was just doing the transfer. You haven't been there, have you?
I've been a couple of times.
To Gap Bill, have you?
Yeah.
I must have been drunk, was I?
Yeah,
I don't remember. But yeah, so this was basically in the old track transitioning to the new track, and it was a case of I'd bought a American motorhome and that previously, and I was just there. You know what? This is my path. Every single year. So.
So from that now, you're still doing a lot of driving.
Yeah.
But will we see Julian Smith compete again? Is that something you've got any interest in?
Well, moving on from the Gap Bill side of things, I was on the podium with Mad Mike and that in probably 2013 or 14 with the Blitz 34, which again, it's not a competition car, but again, 500-600 horsepower back in those days kind of cut it. Whereas now, in recent times, I haven't even bothered entering the Gap Bill competitions because
It's madness.
It's madness, and if you, in my vision of sport, if you don't have the ability to win, don't bother entering. So for me, I each year I was going, the level of cars and builds was just going absolutely full retard, and everyone knows Frederick Asbo and things like that, and his ability, but also the flip side is, and again it's worth googling, Tors Ringnes, who's a very, very good
Incredible
driver.
Yeah,
he had a very bad crash there about.
I was there,
really,
literally.
Yeah, about 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah,
so again,
GT86 on the roof.
Yeah,
going
100 mile an hour
knots,
plus. Yeah, exactly. So the pros and cons of actual being competitive there and having a good time has kind of led me to buying the best gearbox. I've got a 3.2 thousand plus horsepower, 3.2 RB, etc. I've had a 34, which I've had tucked away for the four-door with a full cage and air jacks and all of that. So I really have to be a bit kind of mature now to say, you know what, most important person in my life is me, and get that out, get it built, get to Gap Bill, because
so that's a very long-winded yes. Is what we're going with.
Yeah, it is, because the thing is that I would prefer to be having fun that leads into competition. The one thing I'm never going to do in my life is make mistakes that I made years ago, where I literally had the addiction take over all our common sense, where literally I couldn't afford to feed my family, I couldn't afford anything, but I could still afford to put tyres and fuel on a drift car. So I'd never again make that mistake. So I'd only compete if I was going to be competitive. That is the long and short of it.
Well, I think you probably still would be. You are.
Oh, thank you.
Drifting.
But I heard you have entered BDC this year.
I have, yeah. Well, you know, I've got to do something with my time, haven't I? So
apart from this,
apart from this, yeah. But no, I think that's a very valid lesson. Is that you need to be having a stable life and enjoying drifting for the sake of drifting, and competition should just, in my opinion, just be something that you add on to that.
Yeah.
So I think if people are going to learn anything from this, that would be a great
I'd be
lesson.
of the very same opinion, really.
There you go. Well, on that note, Julian, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Cool.
I wish you the best of success in everything you endeavour to do from here on.
Have a good time, basically.
And well, we're going to have to do this again, because I feel like we've skimmed through so many things.
A lot.
And there's so much more we can talk about.
Oh, there is, yeah.
Same time next year?
Same time next year. What, to see if
when you're competing?
See if I got the 34 done.
Let's see. Next time. Thank you.
Sound.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. I hope you enjoyed our little time with Julian Smith from Garage D here.
Cool.
I certainly did. I learned a few things myself. And see you next Monday at 7.